What's up everybody, it's your boy Nate. If you click this video, then you already know we're gonna be making a super dope electric text using Adobe After Effects. And I know when you're starting out creating motion graphics in After Effects, it can be kind of daunting to pick what effects to make or what things to kind of focus on. So today in this tutorial, you're gonna be able to hone in some skills that are essential and carry you over to making all sorts of cool motion graphics, whether that's logo animations or text animations. Yeah, we're gonna be doing the whole works. It's okay if you haven't even touched the software before, because we're going to be breaking it down using super clear instructions. I'll tell you all the shortcuts that I'm using, as well as any plugins that are going to help you out to make your projects a whole lot easier. So I'm super excited. I know you are too. All right, let's go. As a motion graphics designer, I'm always coming up with cool and exciting ways to animate logos and text, which if you guys have checked out the channel before, then you probably already know, because we've talked about things like a write-on text or even making kinetic text in After Effects. So today we're doing something super energetic and exciting. We're going to be dealing with electric logo animations right within After Effects. Now you're going to want to take a look at this video, check out down below, because it is about a 20-minute tutorial. We're going to be taking it from the very basic bare bones beginning and taking you all the way through the end of rendering. Okay, so right here you can see I have a completely blank desktop. So the first thing I want to do is actually pull up Adobe After Effects. Now this technique will work in any version of After Effects that you're using, but I'm going to be using the Adobe After Effects 2022 version, which is the newest version. If you guys are curious about the difference between 2022 and some of the older versions, we got a video of that on the channel here as well. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and click on this. So bam, right here I am in After Effects. This is your first time looking at After Effects. Down below is going to be the timeline. Right here in the middle is the composition window, and on the sides here are effects controls and our project panel, as well as some presets and other options. Okay, cool. So here we have After Effects pulled up, and I just hopped into the project already, so you guys can see the breakdown of how this effect works. We actually don't really have too many layers going on. Here is the final result. So bam, yeah, that looks pretty cool and energetic. Cool, so that's what the final result looks like. Let me just go ahead and clear this out, and we're gonna start from absolute scratch to take you through this project. So I'm gonna go ahead and just create a brand new project. Bam, this is what After Effects looks like, bare bones. When you're first starting out, there's gonna be nothing. So very first thing that you wanna do is go ahead and make a brand new composition. To do that, we can just click on the middle here and click on the Make a New Composition button. Instantly, you're gonna get this pop-up with all these different options. One thing I like to do is just go ahead and name this logo, because this is going to be where we're going to put in our logo that we want to animate. Now I'm going to leave it at 1920 by 1080, but again, you guys can use whatever presets you want. I also like it at 24 frames per second. 24 frames per second seems to be what I like the most, and it also gives me some nice render times. So once you have that all set, you can just go ahead and press OK. Bam, we have a brand new composition. The next thing, once you have a brand new composition, is to actually import whatever logo that you want to use into After Effects. The main way I like to import footage is just by dragging and dropping it. It seems to be the simplest. So I'm gonna go ahead here and look at our BLACKMIXTURE folder, our branding. We have some logo files here, and we have a few different ones. We have the color mark one, which is the one that you guys are probably gonna see here in the corner next to the subscribe button, which, by the way, if you guys are new here, you might want to consider subscribing. And then here we also have the BLACKMIXTURE logo text here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and click and drag on this. I'm gonna bring this over to my project panel over here on the left side. Bam, you can see it's right there and imported. Now to bring this into the composition, all I have to do is drag this in the middle here, or I can bring it down here, which is gonna import it right in the center. Now off the bat, you're gonna see that this is a completely black screen, and the reason for this is because our logo is actually black, and then our background is also being rendered as black. So I wanna click on this little option right here, which says Toggle Transparency Grid. It's right below the composition window and right next to a few of these other options. And when I click on it, you're gonna see instantly we get this checkered background, which shows us what's transparent. Now, my logo imported super huge, and sometimes if you're working with a really big file, it's gonna come out the same way as well. What we can do is press S on our keyboard, and that's gonna pull up the scale options down here in the bottom. By default, it's gonna be set to 100%. So let me just go ahead and shrink this down by clicking and dragging on this. and lowering it down until it's nice and center in the frame. We don't want it to be too small or too big. We kind of want it exactly how we want this final result to look. So I'm thinking maybe 20% is pretty nice for me. Cool, so that's looking pretty good. Nice. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is create a brand new composition using that same composition that we just created. And the reason why is because we want all of these effects to apply to this logo or whatever text that you guys are bringing in here, but we want this to be independent of the effects that we're going to be doing later on. And if that's a little bit confusing at first, it's going to make a whole lot more sense in a few seconds. So to create a brand new composition using that composition that we just made, it's pretty easy. All we have to do is click on this logo composition here in the top left corner, which is in the project panel. And then we want to click and drag on it all the way down to this icon that looks like a bunch of shapes. And what this icon is, it's the make a new composition button. Once you have it hovered over there, you can just go ahead and let go, and bam, you're gonna see you have a brand new composition called logo 2 with that same composition earlier of logo 1. Now, I wanna go ahead and just rename this composition that we just created, and let's call this final. And cool, we have that nice and set. Another thing I noticed is that we have not saved out our project, so this would be actually a really great time to go ahead and also just click on File, Save, and save this project out. I'm gonna call this Electric Text Tutorial. The reason why we want to save our project while we're working on it is because After Effects is notorious for crashing, and there have been times when I've worked painstakingly long hours only to have After Effects crash, and then bam, all of a sudden I lost all my work and I had to start over. So I don't want you guys to have to go through that headache, and I want to save you some time and trouble by making sure that you go ahead and save that project. Also, to make your life a little bit easier, you can go up to Edit in the top and then go down to Preferences, and then over here you're going to see an option that says Autosave. Make sure that you have your autosave set up. So when you click on the autosave, you're going to see this option pull up. Make sure you have these two options checked. Save every, and you can set however long. I like to do it really quickly, so I'll just do 2 minutes. Then also save when starting the render queue. That way, when you go ahead and render it, it's actually gonna also save your project as well. Now, these next two options don't really matter. It could be however many project versions you want. If it's set to 5, then it's just gonna overwrite the previous ones after it gets to 5. And you can also make it go to whichever location you want. I like to keep everything in the same project folder, so I click it next to project. Once you have those settings set, you can just go ahead and click OK. All right, nice. So you're all set to get into animating and adding effects to this. We have this text here, but we want to tell After Effects to use the information from this layer to drive the different electric text effects. But right now, After Effects only sees this as a bunch of pixels, but instead we want it to work with masks because those are going to tell After Effects where each letter is formed and where it ends and where it begins. So to do this, once we have our logo composition selected here, we can go all the way up to the top by layer and then click on Auto Trace. When you click on Auto Trace, you're gonna get this option pull up for all these different settings, but I pretty much keep it at the default settings. If yours looks a little bit different, you can go ahead and check out the options here to copy them over. But one really great way to make sure that your Auto Trace comes out nice is to make sure that you click on this option that says Preview, and it's gonna highlight the different masks that After Effects is gonna create. So just looking at this right now, I can already tell that this is gonna come out good. We have all these different masks that look perfectly around the letters. So cool. Once everything's looking good, we can go ahead and press OK, and instantly you can see After Effects has auto traced that logo layer that we created, which is looking pretty nice because everything is right and neat there. Once we have the logo auto trace, we want to apply an effect called SABER. It's a free effect that you can get from Video Copilot, and I'll be leaving a link down in the description. If you guys are also curious about this effect, I've talked about it plenty of times in the top 10 best free plugins videos for After Effects. It's one of the fastest ways to create a really cool, energetic, and electric look. So I guarantee you guys are going to want to download it and save you a whole bunch of time. Once you have that downloaded and installed, you're going to find the SABER effect whenever you right click on the layer and you go over to Effect, Video Copilot, and then you can see here I have the option that says SABER, and this is the one I want to go ahead and select. Now, by default, SABER is just going to pop up with this straight glowing line, and that's not at all what we want. Instead, we want this glowing line to be wrapped around our text layers. So to do that, we can go down to the options here in the effects controls. We'll see one that says Customize Core. If you click on this little arrow, you're going to see some more options pop up, and we want to click on the option that says Core Type and change it from SABER and make it instead Layer Masks. Bam! Once we do that, you're going to see it's a big glowing ball all over the screen. And the reason for this is because the glow intensity and the core size are just way too high. So one thing I like to do is go all the way up to the top here by presets and then change it from select, and I want to go all the way down to the option that says neon. This is going to mimic a neon sign, and I like the settings by this a lot. Nice. So bam, this is what it looks like when you have the neon preset. This is still a little bit too bright, so I want to change this percentage amount in the glow intensity from something like 88%, and I want to drag this all the way down. Now you're gonna see once I drag this intensity down, we're gonna get a bit more of those letters coming in more legibly, and I think maybe 20% is gonna be good for this. Wow, yeah, that's looking really cool. Kind of reminds me of Stranger Things, huh? So there's one little tricky thing that After Effects does whenever you auto trace layers, and we also want to go ahead and clean this up a bit. So to do that, let's select on this logo layer and press M, and you're gonna see that there's this stopwatch icon that's highlighted for mask path, and it's all of these different masks, and After Effects actually already gave them a keyframe, which we don't really need at this moment. So what I want to do is click and drag on the mask path all the way down, and that's going to help us deselect all of those and delete those keyframes for us. Nice. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. We can also just scroll all the way up to the top and then click on this little arrow here, which is going to pull back up all those options, so that way our project looks nice and neat. Okay, cool. So now that we have our text nice and glowy, looking dope, let's go ahead and animate this so it's not just on all the time. The main animation options that I want to focus on are going to be the mask evolution, the start size, the end size, and the end offset. So let's make sure that we're at the very beginning frame in our timeline, and then let's go ahead and select on mask evolution and click this little stopwatch icon, which is going to set a keyframe there. We also want to select start size, and end offset. And then while we're at it, let's also just lower down this end roundness from 0.5 to something like 0. But again, this is also just like a stylistic choice for you guys, so you don't really have to worry about it, and you can really make it however you like. Once we have those checked off, let's make sure that we're still selected in that layer, and then we're going to press a U on our keyboard, and this is going to pull up all the different keyframes for that layer. It's a really handy shortcut that I use all the time, so it might be one that you want to remember. Pressing U will bring up all the keyframes for that layer. And now you're going to see that mask evolution, start size, and end offset are the only options that are pulled up here down in the bottom. Since this looks like a final frame of a reveal, let's go ahead and select these keyframes by clicking and dragging in the timeline and then highlighting all of them. Then I want to move these over to about 2 seconds in. You guys can set this however you'd like. If you want your animation to end after 2 seconds like I do, that's why we're setting it down here at 2 seconds. But hey, if you want your animation to end a little bit earlier, you can also set it to 1 second and then just change your keyframes accordingly. I think 2 seconds works pretty well for most basic animations and motion graphics, so that's why I'm using 2 seconds. Next thing that we want to focus on are the end size, and let's move this end size keyframe from 2 seconds to end at about 1 second in. The next thing I want to do is change my start size and make it end at about 1.5 seconds in. If you're curious why the timeline shows up as 1:12, that's because we're working in 24 frames per second, so half of a second is going to be 12 frames. And I like working in these even number multiples. So once we have those set, let's go all the way back to the beginning of the timeline, and then let's go ahead and keyframe down the start size, and end offset from 100% down to 0%. So there's the end size set to 0% and then the end offset set to 0%. Nice, that's looking pretty cool. Now that we have those set, we can also go ahead and change the mask evolution from 0. Let's change this value from 0 to something like 10. Okay, cool. What 10 means for mask evolution is pretty much rotate around a full 360 degrees 10 times. So if you feel like your animation is happening too quickly or too slowly, you can make sure that you adjust those values accordingly. Cool. So let's go ahead and preview this animation by pressing spacebar on our keyboard, and yo, instantly we get a super dope effect. We have this neon sign flickering on. That actually looks really cool to me. One thing I also like to do, just because I'm a stickler for smoothing out my animations, is I want to go ahead and select on all these keyframes, and then I can right click on them and go to keyframe assistant easy ease. That's going to make the start and the end times instead of just ramping from 0 to 100 linearly, it's going to actually have a nice curve to it, which you can also see a little bit more in detail by clicking on this icon here, which is the graph editor icon. And instantly you can see that we have this nice curve happening. Once you get into more advanced animations, you may want to mess around with your different curves and making different shapes and whatnot. One of my favorite ones to make is an upside down parabola, which gets a little bit tricky to do in After Effects. So I have this really cool plugin called Motion, which makes me make these adjustments a lot easier without going into the graph editor. I can in fact just click and drag on this here, and instantly we get this nice graphical user interface. If you guys are curious about Motion, it is a plugin that costs money, so when you're first starting out, maybe it's not something that you want to fully invest in, but I can guarantee you once you install it, and if you take motion graphics seriously, it is one of my favorite plugins to have for After Effects. And if you're curious about this plugin and many more dope plugins for After Effects that are on the paid side, we have also a video of that as well that you can check out on the channel. So now that I have those keyframes adjusted, let me go ahead and press spacebar on my keyboard, and wow, yeah, this is looking really nice. Okay, cool. So now that that's set, let's just go ahead and add in a background, and you guys can use whatever you want, some sort of electrical footage or anything, but for me, I want to use one from Envato Elements. They're one of my favorite sponsors here on the channel. Even if they weren't sponsoring us, I would probably check them out just because they have so many dope resources. If you guys are curious though to use Envato Elements, we have a link down in the description that's going to give you a discount for your first month. So let me just go ahead and pull up this footage, which I have downloaded here. So here's what this background footage looks like. It's pretty basic, but it has all of these really cool effects. I can almost even assume that they might have used something like SABER to make this in the first place. I'm just gonna go ahead and drag and drop this right here into my timeline, and instantly you can see it takes over the footage. So what I wanna do is I want to make sure that this layer is below my logo layer, which I can do by clicking and dragging on it here and then pulling it down. And now you're going to see that we actually don't have any background at all. The reason for this is because by default, the SABER effect will fill in all the transparency layers with black, but you can get rid of this black super easily by going down here to blending mode and changing this option from normal to instead either screen or add. Screen is going to remove the black background, and you're going to find that the whites are going to be a little bit softer when they blend with the layer below them, whereas add is going to be one that gets rid of the black background and adds in the white light, so anything below it gets a little bit brighter. So you guys can pick whichever option you think is best for this effect. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. The next thing that we want to do is go back to our project panel up here in the top left corner, and I want to drag in another instance of that logo composition that we created. So to import this into the timeline, I'm just going to drag this in, and I'm going to pop this right below the original one that we created in between these two layers here, and bam, you can see that right now the logo is there. We have the electric effect on top, and then we have our background down below. Now when we're working with multiple instances of the same composition in After Effects, one thing I like to do is rename them just so that we keep our organization nice and tidy. To do this, you can right click on the layer, and then let's go ahead and rename that first one that we created from logo to neon animation. That way we know exactly where the neon animation is, and the logo layer is just down here below. The next thing that I want to do is select on our electric circuit background, and I want to go ahead and duplicate it. To do that in After Effects, we can select on that layer and then press Ctrl D, which is just going to duplicate it. And then I want to make sure that I also rename this, because this is going to be our logo background. So I'm just going to call this logo BG. The reason why I call this logo background is because we're actually going to be putting this inside of that black logo right now. And the way that we do this is by selecting on the track matte options and changing it from none. And then we want to go ahead and change it to alpha matte. Instantly, you're going to see the logo disappears. But if we click and drag on that same logo BG layer in the composition window, you're going to see that we have the pattern sticking to only where that logo that we just created was. We can actually drag this around and move it around so we get a nice texture going on. So right about here is looking pretty good for me. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. The next thing that I want to do is add in a curves effect so that we can brighten up and separate this logo background from the original background that we have. To do this, I'm going to right click on the layer and then go up to Effect, Color Correction, and then Curves. Next, I'm going to go to the Effects controls, and you're going to see this graph, which is just a straight line. To raise the brightness, I want to click on this graph and drag up this line a bit, and that is looking pretty nice. And all of a sudden, we start to see that that logo background is popping out a bit more. Another thing that we can do is actually keyframe though this brightness to match the logo animating on. So I want to actually go ahead and reset this first. That's going to bring it back down to that regular level. And instead, I'm going to go to curves, and this little stopwatch icon that you can see next to curves, we want to go ahead and select it. That way we get a brand new keyframe. Next, I'm going to scrub forward in the timeline to this brighter part of the footage. Once that neon animation is really going ham, I'm going to click and drag on this curves and just brighten it up a bit. I think that is looking kind of cool right there. If we want to see exactly where those keyframes are, we can press U on our keyboard, and that's going to pull up our animated properties. So I'm actually going to move this first one over to 12 frames just because I like having my animations happen at nice even intervals. And I'm going to even move this one over right in between those other two keyframes, so about 1.25 seconds. And let's go ahead, pull this timeline back and press spacebar to preview our animation. Wow, okay, that is looking super sick. Now, you guys can finish up right here, but if you're interested in making a nice distorted warp transition for this, what we can do is create a brand new adjustment layer. All we have to do is right click in our timeline, go up to new, then adjustment layer, and that's gonna create a brand new adjustment layer for us. The next thing I wanna do is apply an optics compensation effect to this. Right click on it, go to effect, and then down under distort, you're gonna see the option for optics compensation. What optics compensation is normally used for is whenever you're shooting with something like a wide angle lens, probably even like how I'm doing right now. You can see this this side is a little bit warped or a little bit curved, so sometimes people even use this effect just for fixing lenses. However, in this case, we're gonna be using it to be distorting our footage. The first option that I wanna go ahead and select is this reverse lens distortion option, and I wanna make sure that that is checked. And then let's go down into the timeline and scrub forward, and then let's select field of view, which by default is set to 0. Let's go ahead and click on this stopwatch icon to create a brand new keyframe. And then I'm gonna go all the way back to the beginning of the timeline, and I'm gonna drag up this value from 0, maybe like 70, or I think 70 looks pretty cool. Yeah, that's looking pretty nice. Next, when I hit spacebar on, bam, you can see we get this really subtle effect. If you want it to be a bit more poppy, you can also add in an easy ease to it as well. Maybe I'll even increase this a bit so it's extra distorted. So definitely up to you guys to style this however you want, based on the techniques that you learned here from auto tracing, being able to import a logo, and then also being able to apply effects and adjustment layers. You're going to be able to create all sorts of variations of this. So yeah, this is looking pretty good, and I think this is about ready to render. To render this out, we want to go ahead all the way up to composition, and then let's select on add to render queue, which is going to be down here in this option. Instantly, you're going to see that you get this render queue here down where the timeline used to be, and I want to click on this little text that says lossless, and when I click on it, I'm gonna get this brand new pop-up window with all of these different options that may seem super daunting at first, but this is essentially the output module, which says what format do we want this video to come out for us. By default, it's gonna be set to AVI, but one of my favorite ones to work with is QuickTime, and under format options, I change it to Apple ProRes 422 LT. If you're curious what that is, it's gonna be a high resolution and also a small file size for After Effects to work with, as well as a great format for importing into other software. If you're curious about more render options, like ones that give you transparent backgrounds so you can use this animation in a whole bunch of other ways, we have a whole video on exporting animations with transparent backgrounds, which you can check out here on the channel. So cool, once we have those options set, I'm gonna go ahead and press OK. And then here on the output to option, if we click on this blue text, we're gonna get a pop-up window, which is gonna give us where we wanna export our project. So I'm gonna call this electric text tutorial, and then I'm gonna press enter, and bam, we are all set to go ahead and render this bad boy out. So I'm gonna go ahead and press render here on the bottom right, and wow, this is just zipping through that animation super quickly. Now to preview this animation, I'm gonna click down on this output module, and then it's gonna give me this path where that project just got exported. Go ahead and check out how this came out. Yo, this is looking super sick. And just like that, we learned how to make a super dope electric effect, which can be applied to just about any logo that you want. And of course, the same techniques that I use were the ones that I used to create the thumbnail here on the channel. So wow, you guys are all done. I want you to go ahead and give yourself a pat on the back, because I know After Effects can be pretty tricky and daunting, especially when you're just getting into motion graphics with all these different options and all these different ways to animate things. So you should commend yourself for sitting through this and learning this effect, because because I guarantee you the same techniques that you apply here, you're gonna find yourself using over and over again in a bunch of different projects, whether that's something for a client or something just for yourself. Now, I'm super thankful to make this video for you guys. This would not be possible if it wasn't thanks to all of you watching, commenting, and hitting like, because hey, every single like helps the YouTube algorithm by telling it that, hey, we're not just uploading trash videos and we're actually teaching people. And every time that you guys comment, we actually do read it and we get a bunch of ideas and we get to learn more about what's helping and what ways to improve the channel. So I really appreciate everyone who sent us so many dope comments and kept smashing that like button. And hey, if you're new to the channel and you don't want to miss out on any super dope tutorials or tips and tricks, you might want to consider hitting that subscribe button and dinging that post notification bell so you don't miss out. Anyways, I'm super excited to see all the dope animations that you guys are going to be creating using this effect. So why not tag us or send us a DM at BLACKMIXTURE so we could check it out. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope to catch you on the next one. Peace.